Hi, this is Dennis Snipe, host of the thought-provoking, solution-oriented talk show, daring to make a difference in our communities, entitled FocusTalk. And I'm looking for you to be the next featured guest on FocusTalk. If you're an entrepreneur, an author, community-based organization, artist, or if you're simply daring to make a difference in your community, I need to hear from you. Here's what I need you to do. Send an email to dennis@dennissnipe.com with your name, brief description of what you do, contact number, and why you should be a guest on Focus Talk. I look forward to hearing from you soon. In the meantime, please continue to stay focused. You're in tune to Chicago's most popular college music radio station. 89.3 is WKKC. This is Focus Talk, the thought-provoking, solution-oriented talk show, daring to make a difference in our communities. We're talking on a regular basis because the answers really matter. What are we talking about? We're talking about politics, religion, personal development, education, history, music, and then from time to time, we are spotlighting positive people who are doing positive things right here in the Inglewood community, the entire Chicagoland area, as well as the entire nation. I'm your host, Dennis Snipe. Joining me in the studio today is Minister Jeffrey Muhammad. Brother Jeffrey, how are you today?
I'm fantastic. How about yourself?
I am well. Thank you very much for being a part of today's show. Now, we've had an opportunity. I've had the privilege of working with you and seeing you at the mosque doing different things, and very impressed by your work. Give me some information as to what you do. What is your role with the Nation of Islam?
I'm an FOI, Fruit of Islam. I am the Assistant Minister, Mosque Mariam, specifically Assistant Minister to Minister Ishmael Muhammad, who is the National Assistant to the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. I'm also chair of Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan's Justice or Else here in the city of Chicago.
Okay. All right. Now, needless to say, there are a lot of things that are going on in the nation at this particular time, or the Nation of Islam, to say specifically. But as far as your role, you talked about justice or else. Let's talk about the movement itself.
Okay.
What is the movement about?
Well, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan in 1995 called for 1 million men to join him in Washington, D.C. And he was blessed that nearly 2 million men came for a day of atonement and reconciliation. 20 years later, he called again for the 20th anniversary of the Million Man March, but this time, instead of atonement and reconciliation, he went under a call of justice or else. And in implementing that theme, he encouraged everyone to go back into their cities and towns and establish local organizing committees with the intent purpose of bringing justice to causes in your local areas, establishing Black circles where we could begin to become intentional with Black economics, Black thought, Black education, Black self-empowerment, Black entrepreneurial spirit, whole 9 yards of Black people doing for self under the banner of justice or else.
Now, what does the else part mean? Is that an ultimatum?
Absolutely.
Okay.
The or else is whatever the issue of justice is. We believe in a God of justice. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad teaches that justice is the weapon that God uses. Justice means fair dealing. And we as a people have been mistreated and treated unfairly since we have been in North America. And at a certain point, the laws of cause and effect begin to play a part in the dynamics of this country. With the unfairness that have occurred to us, at some point the universe will cry out and become fair in its punishment to those who have been unfair to us. It also means the or else is, as the Bible says, Moses tells Pharaoh, let my people go. The or else for us is to let Pharaoh go and begin to do something for ourselves.
Minister Jeffrey, is it, I understand the concept, however, is it that easy considering that the people who are part of the oppression have been in it for so long, it has become second nature? It is similar to the mule who has worked for so long on the plow that even after he's released, he continues to travel in that same motion because that's all that he knows.
That's correct. Our people are walking amnesia victims. And a person experiencing amnesia, they don't know who they are. And everyone around them that should be familiar are no longer familiar. They don't recognize their name. They don't recognize their family. They don't recognize their history. They only can know what someone tells them who they are. Black people in America go by names that they have not given to themselves, a culture that they did not establish. They eat foods that they did not ascribe to, and they follow different ways and more ways of other people that were forced upon them. So the initial part in or else is to give a knowledge of self, which would help us to identify with our culture, help us to identify with a knowledge of self. And a knowledge of self is a reawakening of the God which is in each and every human being. When a person has been made slave to another, then they've been made to abandon the Creator. The Creator is the only one that a human being should bow down to. But our community bows down to that which is lesser than God. So the primary thing is to remind man that there is a superior being to mere mortals, and that superior being is God. The reawakening of a higher deity in one's life helps one to rise above one's current steps, current progress, but also enlivens the spirit to make one think that I can be better than who I was. I have a challenge to be something greater than who I am, and the ultimate purpose in my life is to be what God desires for me to be.
Now, Minister Jeffrey, how long does this process of awakening takes? Because we are dealing with the same issues in this present age that we have been dealing with for well over 50 years. Mm-hmm. The teachings of Malcolm X, mm-hmm. of Martin Luther King, really haven't changed because we're dealing with the same issue.
Absolutely.
And so what do we have to do in order to speed up the process or to get it to a point where people of color understand and begin to wake up and say, hey, we have to do something different because it's happening over and over again?
Well, there's no timeline for the reawakening process. We have been made slaves for over 400 years. And it has taken 440 plus years to take a man that once lived in a mighty state in what is now called Africa to now live the life of a so-called Negro in America. That took years to break a man down into animal stages. It took 400 years to take a man who took care of his family to now render black men that walk the streets with their pants down, no longer combing their hair, no longer respecting women, no longer desiring to take care of their children. There's a process. It's taken hundreds of years. And we pray that the process does not take hundreds of years to reverse, but we work painstakingly and we work with patience, because a problem that took that long will not be cured overnight. But each day we see steps of progress. But as long as a system is allowed to stay in place, the progress will take a long time. That's where we believe that God will intervene and destroy the system that is keeping us stuck in this quagmire. At his due time, he will destroy this system and we will be allowed to be who we are.
Okay. Mr. Jeffrey, let's shift gears just for a moment. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about the situation here in Chicago, the violence. Mm-hmm. And it seems as if though it is escalating. And for the most part, we have the blame game going on because the police are pointing toward the kids. The kids are saying, well, it's what's going on, what it is that I see. And then we have the church that is saying another thing as to it is the problem with the breakdown of the family. And everyone is pointing toward the other person saying, well, it's your fault. It's your fault. It's their fault. It's his fault. Whose fault do you think it is?
Well,
and why?
Each person has to accept their own part of the responsibility. Mm-hmm. But in responding to the first part, media has made it to appear that black on black murder is rising. Even though we don't want to see one murder of our people. We look at the statistics going back into the 70s, 60s, even going back into the 50s, 40s, and 30s. The number of black deaths are lower than they were 30 to 40 years ago. But someone has put into this plan to make it seem that we're at an all-time high of murder. We're not. We're at low numbers. Not excusing any of us to commit murders. They've even determined our dialogue with each other. So the term black on black crime. Well, most crime in a community is committed by a person of that community. We never hear the term white on white crime. We don't hear the term Latino on Latino crime. We don't hear the term Asian on Asian crime. Even though 80+% of crime in your community is committed by someone in your community. We're being defined to be bad people. We're being intentionally placed in a category by ourselves. So that systemically we can be removed and wiped out, and the rest of society will clap their hands. You don't read in the newspaper of when one white guy kills another. They don't put that, but we're highlighted. If a young Caucasian robs another Caucasian, they'll say names but no pictures. But if we rob each other, they find the worst picture that they can find of us, and they show us on TV. And I ask every listener, when you watch the news tonight, count the stories of any other ethnicity that's committed a crime. And see if you can see the picture of the person that committed the crime. And tomorrow in the newspaper, of those that have committed crimes, see how many pictures of those are black or those of other colors. The majority that you'll be able to see an image is of us. So we know that we're being highlighted for a specific reason. Now, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan says, according to the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, that the sins and murders of black people are really not black people's fault. These are the sins of those that brought us here as slaves, dehumanized us, did not allow us to empower ourselves economically. So many of us our age, we say that rich white people have old money. Old money is built on the backs of old slaves. So for years, they were able to make millions with employees that they never had to pay, never had to house, and never had to feed. Had we had a share in that wealth, we would not have generational poverty. We'd have generational wealth. And because we have generational poverty, our children are fed up and disgusted with the same narrative of college, get a good job, you'll be successful. They say, mom didn't make it, dad didn't make it, grandma didn't make it, granddad didn't make it. To heck with this, I'm going to survive. So even in our surviving, it's not our fault. The conditions around us have made us who we are.
Now, is that in the least bit diminishing the level of responsibility?
Not at all. If we had the opportunity to be responsible, then we should be held to that category. When you're living in a colonized neighborhood, you can't establish a business if you can't receive the same rules that other people can. For instance, if you and I both go to a bank and we have a European counterpart, it's a greater percentage that he can get a business loan than we can. Black folks can't get housing. We are scrutinized, I think it's called redlining process, to get housing. So the average young black man can't get a $50,000 house. It's harder for him to get a $50,000 loan for a house over a 30-year period But that same young black man can go get a $50,000 car and pay it for 5 years, show 2 check stubs. They'll sell him a Cadillac Escalade. But if he wants to get property, he has to go above and beyond and show his credit rating, his job, market value. He has to do a whole lot to establish real estate, but they'll give him a car. You see young men with Mercedes-Benz making $30,000 a year. But to try to get property, they are denied. So it's systemic that the playing field and the rules by which we play, they are not the same. Our education, and it can be proven, the education that's given to black children is inferior to the education that's given to white children. School system of Chicago Public Schools has an inferior school system to the suburban schools. But yet when we go to college, we're expected to compete with those who've already had an advantage. So some say it's a blame game. No, it's unfair. And are we to be blamed because we're in a society that does not care about us? Are we to always have to pull up our bootstraps when half of us don't have boots? Are we to keep blaming ourselves, but yet we live in a system where no help comes to us? At a certain point, we got to point the finger and say, if you're not going to help us, then we'll leave you alone and we'll just help ourselves.
Well, do I need to combat that particular situation that you mentioned, which is also true, but do I need to learn the game and then get in the game and play it? Perhaps change the rules? Do I become the angry black man? Or what do I do in the middle of it? Because we see it happening regularly, each and every day. It's on the news. It's in the papers. It's all around us, and you feel it. But how do you combat it?
You better stay an angry black man living in America, because the minute you get happy in this, you'll be a dead black man. Now, what was the first question that you said?
What do I do? Do I learn the game?
No. You don't learn the game because you're not on the rule-making board of the game. You're never allowed to make the rules. And our former president proved that as president of the United States. He was not even allowed to recommend a Supreme Court judge. As the highest executive office in this country, he was told by his subordinates, there's no sense of you recommending a judge. We are not even going to consider any Supreme Court judge as long as you're in office. So for years, the Supreme Court did not have a full court, strictly because they told the black man, you can forget it. And the minute that a new president comes in, he's able to appoint a Supreme Court judge. So a black man as president could do less in office than any president could do for his people. And our current president has proven it. By the minute he came in office, he began to make changes the way he wanted to. And it took Barack Obama 8 years, and he never could make the changes that he desired.
Well, is it safe to say that Barack was simply a politician trying to keep his job like anyone else?
No, I think Barack Obama in his heart had an idea for change. I just think that in his innocence, he had no idea of what he was going to meet when he became president. And once he got to that level, he began to see the hidden hand and said, I don't have the authority that I thought I was going to have.
Well, wouldn't it be a little naive on his part to think anything else?
Then any person that believes that they can play the game is naive. And no black man should ever walk into any situation being naive. If you walk into a situation being naive, then you got to consider, man, am I really as mature as a man as I should be? Because the minute that I am naive, I need to hold my pace, get knowledge, and only proceed when I get knowledge, and keep walking when I get wisdom. But if I'm walking in ignorance, I better stand still because I'm about to bump my head.
So, in the meantime, he was just place value?
He was, as the minister said, he was selected. And he was allowed to be president.
Why was he selected?
I really don't know. I don't know why they selected Barack Obama. He was a great human, great individual. But to give us the chance to say, okay, we'll allow you to sit in the position. And after he leaves the office, don't ever think you're going to get here again. And even with a black man sitting there, we gave you Negroes the highest position. Nothing happened for you. So don't think we're going to do anything else for you. For me, it was a wake-up call that every black man should realize that the highest so-called position in this country, if it could not affect change, that means he's president of monopoly, president of life, president of whatever game, and not one rule could change towards us, then we either need to play our own game, establish another board game, or destroy the damn game that we're playing. But we can't keep playing by the same rules.
So, is there a reason to have hope? Or
in what?
In the American way, the nuclear family, the picket fence, the dream.
There is no American dream for any black man. There is hope for black people. As long as black people can put their faith and hope in God, they have opportunities. But when they put their faith and hope in America, then they have no opportunities other than what America allows them to have. And that's very limited.
Now, Minister Jeffrey, that sounds very anti-American. And it sounds as if though that, you know, I don't believe in the American dream, the red, the blue, the stripes, the stars, you know, that whole piece. Is that just a fantasy for people of color?
That's a nightmare for people of color. See, if we have to even equate the language games, grown people don't play games. Our children play games. So if we have to play the game of others that have set the rules for us, then as adults, if other people are establishing rules for us that we have to learn to play, and they have the right to change the rules at any given time, then we can never live in a system of justice. You can only be just when the rules are set and everybody has to play by the same rules. Reverend Jackson says it beautifully. He says when black people are allowed to play by a set of rules and you can't change it, we excel. When they allowed us to play baseball and they didn't change the rules, we became great. They allowed us to play basketball. They did change the rules. When Kareem Abdul-Jabbar became a freshman at UCLA, the NCAA put a rule in, no dunking. So for his 4 years at UCLA, no player was allowed to dunk a basketball. The day Kareem Abdul-Jabbar graduated, they recruited Bill Walton, also a 7-footer. They put the dunking rule back in for Bill Walton, took it out for Kareem Abdul-Jabbar because they were nervous that he would obliterate every person he played against. So, with the same playing rule, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar versus dunking established the skyhook and became the greatest scorer in NCAA history. In football, same rules, we do great. In golf, same rules, we do great. In housing, change the rules. We can't get the loan. Now your credit plays a part. Criminal record plays a part. Neighborhood plays a part. Different rules for different people, different outcomes. Different educational system, different outcomes. Different requirements for black people, different outcomes. But if we have the same rules, we can progress at the same level, and most of the time we can succeed faster and better than any of our counterparts. But if we're still playing the game and we can't establish the rules, at some point we got to wake up and say, let's stop playing this game. You have your rules, we have ours. And it's not based in the American dream. We're based in the American political system. The early American pilgrims felt the same way we do right now. The difference is they weren't slaves. They looked to King George and said, you make rules for us. We can't make rules for ourselves. We can't move where we want to move. We can't practice our religion. The school in America is inferior to the school in Europe. The monies that you take from us, you don't reinvest in America. You keep in England. The products that you send to America are inferior than the product that you send to Europe. So therefore we declare that you are unfit to lead us. And they wrote a declaration of independence from the King of England. And they said to him, in fact, we're going to show you what justice looked like. They demanded justice or else. Paul Revere said it this way. He said, don't shoot until you see the whites of their eyes. So he said, when they get close enough, shoot. Their first act, which they call patriotism, but if we were to do it, they'd call us terrorists. They took the number one economic product that England could send to America, which was tea. They dumped millions of pounds of tea into the Boston Harbor, and England lost millions of dollars. America is a coffee drinking country now, strictly because they stopped buying tea from England. When England started losing money, they sent troops to say, how dare you cut into my income? So that is the formula for every people that have been tired of a tyrant. They've declared separation and independence. So it's not a black thought. We can say we're borrowing it from them. When you got tired of a tyrant, you decided you wanted to be in your own. So we follow their playbook. So on July 4th, they declared their independence. So on July 4th, we need to declare our independence. They've been a tyrant to us. We need to remove ourselves from them as they removed themselves from King George.
So we don't assimilate. You create your own system and utilize that in which to free yourselves.
We can assimilate. We should stop integrating. Assimilation is different than integration. We're separate in this country now. The idea in black people's minds seems strange. How are we going to separate from white people? But most of us live in an all-black neighborhood, go to all-black schools. All of our friends are black. Everybody in our church is black. Everybody in my crew is black. And I bet in this room, everybody's crew is mostly black. We go to black clubs. We go buy clothes mostly from black people or black sections. Most of the things we do are with our people, and most of us would never consider ourselves anti-white. There's a few of us that go suburban hopping, but it's not a lot of us that's in that party. Some of us go to a white church, but it's a small percentage of us that are at the all-white church. So we're already separate in our communities. They don't mind being separate. It's us that's chasing them. So in Indiana, when whites moved out of Gary, Indiana, after Mayor Richard Hatcher won, blacks wanted to be like whites. So white people left Gary and made Maryville. Black people wanted to be like white people, moved to Maryville. Whites left Maryville and established Sherrville. We wanted to run into Sherrville, they moved further south, Munster. We wanted to run into Munster, they moved further south, Crown Point. We wanted to go into Crown Point, they moved into Lowell. We wanted to move into Lowell, they started burning crosses, we stopped trying to move south. So everywhere they go, we want to go. But they don't want to go anywhere where we go. So in black schools, you can't find white students that desire to go to a black school, except if it's a Whitney Young. But you don't find any lines of white people desiring to go to Simeon. Simeon is the greatest basketball school in the United States. They don't have one white player that desires to go to Simeon. So white people don't desire to integrate with us. They don't mind assimilating. It's black people that want to be with people that really don't want to be with them. So if the American way is to stick with your own kind, we're not even practicing the American way.
So now, why do we have such opposition when you talk about doing for self and being able to work within the restraint and do what you can? You automatically hear, oh no, I don't want to hear nothing about that black talk.
Right.
And I really don't want to deal with that, because if so, then I will be labeled a racist.
Correct.
And you are telling me that it's a bad thing to be by yourself and to be with other black folks and not be with white folks, because that's the way it should be done. We should live in peace and harmony, and can't we all get along?
That's correct.
And so why is that such an issue when ultimately it's the truth based on what you've just said, that we're simply following a model that has been there since the beginning of time, and we are just following suit. But if you say so, oh, no, I don't want to do that. That's terrible. They won't accept me. They won't embrace me. They won't look at me as equal.
Correct.
But in theory, you're not equal anyway.
They don't look at you as equal. Now, see, that's the part, the mental and spiritual bondage of slavery that made black people grow to hate what they look like, smell like, think like, act like. And the European established himself as a god among black people. So we began to look up to them, look up at them. That in certain times our forefathers would not call white men men, they would call them with the definite article, the man. And in Islam, we only say God is the man. Everybody else is simply a man. But for us, we saw them as the power source. So if God has made me in his image and in his likeness, and if internally I have this thought that Jesus is white, God is white, Moses is white, all the prophets are white, then the person that I see that's in charge of Sears, the person that runs all the companies, they're white like God. They become deities to me, and I bow down to them. And subconsciously, I want to be like them. My own mind begins to establish a dichotomy that if white is good, then black is evil. So white people began to use wording to decode messages in our head. Everything with the term black in front of it became associated with something negative. Black Friday, Black Monday, everything dark was bad. So bad guys wear black. Good guys wear white. Evil was always associated with someone in dark colors. Good was always associated with someone in white. They began to put the tricks upon us that the darker that we are, the more uglier that we are. The more of the African features that we have, the worse looking that we have. And our little girls, even in 2017, desire to have hair like white girls, not realizing that their hair is the stronger of the two types of hair, but because white women have been put in front of them as symbols of beauty, they want to look like them, not realizing that the young white girl wants to look like a black girl. So in white neighborhoods, they don't play with black dolls, they play with white dolls. But little black girls would prefer to play with the white doll than they would with the black doll. So mentally, we have been so destroyed that the minister says that we hate self. In any way that we can get away from being around self, we will. So we have the apologists for people that say we need to be like them. But you can't find many white people that will say publicly that black people doing business with black people is called racism. White folks will say that's common sense. Y'all should do business with each other because we really don't want to. We do business with ourselves. And you see the examples. Go to Chinatown. There are no black businesses in Chinatown. No one calls them racist. They just say that's Chinatown. There are no black businesses in the areas where the Arabs and Palestinians live. None. There are no black businesses in any all-white neighborhood, I would probably say in America. And no one's saying they're racist for us not being there. They're strictly saying we live here, so we cater to our constituents. But in our community is the American dream. You got white, Jewish, Hispanic, Mexican, black, Arab, Indian. You got everybody that makes money in our neighborhood. The travesty is the tax dollars that are made don't stay in the community. Our tax dollars leave the community and enriches someone else's community. So they take $1 million out of the community and go reinvest it in their own community. So even in living the American dream, it's a rainbow with a pot of gold at the end in our community for others, but it's nothing for us in anyone else's community. We get robbed everywhere that we go. We're getting the vampire effect. We get our blood sucked out of us every single day. And at some point, we have to recognize that we are a people that have been misused and taken advantage of.
Now, Brother Jeffrey, speaking of business and speaking of the Justice or Else movement, I want to take you back to November of 2015, the Black Friday protests. Mm-hmm. And there was a situation there at the water tower incident. Can you give me some information as to what happened there, considering that if I'm not mistaken, please correct me if I'm wrong, where the Nation or FOI were there at the water tower, mm-hmm. and you were invited to leave because they were closing down water tower because they did not want FOI to be there in the building?
Well, it's a three-part story. It's 3 parts to that, and I'd have to give credit where it's due. The minister had told everyone boycott Black Friday, mm-hmm. and in coming back, the person that had the idea specifically of water tower was Brother Mays Jackson, and Brother Mays had said, "Let's go to water tower," and the idea was to go into water tower, flood the stores, but buy nothing. So we were on our way to water tower, and we got to the doors, and they didn't want us in. So the FOI were at the front because the police were there blocking us from going in. The police were making threats: if they keep coming, I don't have to hurt anybody. So the brothers stood in front of the police saying, "You're not going to put your hands on these sisters. This is not 1963. We're not about to revisit Alabama. Not about to be no dogs. It's not about to be no water hoses. You're not about to take no stick and beat no sister today." So as we stood there, people are inside water tower and they can't get out. And they won't let us in. So the owner of water tower, he comes down and he says,
to speak with you directly.
He comes down and he says, "Y'all not trying to buy anything today." As we're not trying to buy anything, period. We have the right to protest. So he turns to the police. He said, "Well, we're closing it down for the day. We're shutting water tower down." Police said, "For the whole day?" He said, "If they're not coming in, we don't want them in." So at that point, police turns to me. He said, "Y'all gotta go." I said, "It's a whole lot of us out here. That's up to you. If you think you're gonna move all these brothers the way that you did in Selma, you got another thing coming." They huddled, they shut the door, locked it, and that was the end of water tower. So when people started saying that, they started running down the street, getting in front of other stores. You had a chain effect from Nike, Gucci. They started shutting their doors because they didn't want to see us come to the store. So the story is real. They saw the FOI. We're not letting them in. They locked their doors.
So what does that say to the media? What does that say to white America? What does that say to the Oreo black person who may be black on the outside, but they look at this thing totally different and say, "Well, you know, we just got to get along," as opposed to utilizing the power that you have to be able to make progressive change?
We should get along, but at what cost? If we can't get along and be equitable, then we don't have a relationship anyway. If the relationship is based on someone else benefiting and I'm losing, then the relationship is detrimental to me. If the nation's ideology is not to hate white people, it's not to hate or dislike America, we're not even advocating leaving America. We're not advocating any members of the Nation of Islam or citizens in America to disrespect the flag, disrespect this country, or disrespect this president. We're not taught as members to hate or put our hands on any person, regardless of their creed, their class, their color, political affiliation, or whatnot. We're not taught that at all. However, we are taught to be men and we're taught to be women. So for those that are apologists for America, they have a mental illness that they've been brainwashed. They do not see themselves as an individual. They see themselves still as property to be used by someone else. They've been given a degree of benefit greater than the degree of the community. So if one person rises above their community, they're not greater than the community. And that's a great lesson that the European has taught us. They never allowed the one person to rise above the community. They enforce their millionaires. They force their billionaires. You're going to give back to this university. You're going to build this on our block. You're going to establish this in the neighborhood. You're going to endow a library. You're going to do this. They force those who are successful to come back and help those that are not. When we become famous, we leave the hood, never to return. We don't reinvest. We don't donate. We just get the hell out and try to go where they are. So there's a young rapper named J. Cole. He has a song. He says, the neighbors think I'm selling dope. And he says, in my house, had all these different cars. I sold them. I drive a basic car because every time I came down the block, they pulled me over. I got gold records. President mentioned me by name. I make more money than those in my neighborhood. However, because I'm black and live in a nice house, they think I'm selling dope. So at the end of his song, he says, try this integration, don't work. I think I'm gonna move back to the South Side. Because of all the hatred that I live with my people, it's still not worse than living with white people, and I believe I've made it, and they're still looking at me like I'm a criminal. I'd rather go back with my people that know I'm not a criminal. So at a certain point, all the apologists will have to be sat down because they're only apologizing for their own ignorance.
And on that note, Brother Jeffrey, I'm not going to, I'm stopping here, but I'm not ending.
Okay.
So if you are able to come back,
sure,
I would appreciate that greatly because we have much to talk about.
My honor, brother.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Minister Jeffrey Muhammad from the Nation of Islam, I appreciate you more than you know, and I appreciate your message.
Thank you, brother.
Yes, sir. You're in tune to Chicago's most popular college music radio station. 89.3 is WKKC.
This is Focus Talk with Dennis Snipe on 89.3 WKKC.
Joe.
Blackula.